What's going on, friends and family? Back at y'all with another one. This time I want to talk about a little bit about how relationships work nowadays, because some of us don't really get it, and if you're not too aware, you might end up in an unfortunate situation. So you got to be more careful about who you're picking to choose to be with, and those small choices we make on a whim when we're younger have a big impact later in life if you're not careful. I'm 27 years old. I've been able to avoid a good deal of making small mistakes at a certain expense. There are things that I got to miss out on as a result, but I learned a lot from other people, from friends, and I can tell you this, the mistakes they made, I didn't, as a result of being true to myself and staying out of business that I didn't have to be in, right? But okay, the thing I wanted to get on basically with the relationships was how the idea or how cheating itself spiraled, like how cheating became the norm for a lot of people, and how it's like it's seen as a normalcy now, and then it blew into something that turned into a survival mechanism, and then because of that, it destroyed the fabric of relationships, which then furthered on to destroy basic trust in one another. And it really has a serious systemic issue and impact on our well-being, and we can't keep letting that happen. And we also don't understand like how serious it is. It's because it starts off as small choices that don't really matter in the long term until they start to matter. You know what I'm saying? So how it spiraled. So basically, I like to think that it starts from learning, right? When you mimic, or just when your friends talk about certain things, and then you yourself decide, since they do it, I could do it, type of deal, right? The peer pressure kind of thing, the subconscious version. I mean, you can have the purposeful version. You hear something and you're just like, oh, I'll do that just because they did it and I want to do it. But it's more subconscious. You hear about it and it's like, I guess I could do it if I wanted to because they did it and they're fine, it seems. But most people, they hide their cards. They don't show you what they're doing. They don't tell you that the choices they make have serious issues. So you got to be more careful with that. But it was subconscious. So let's start with the dudes. So basically, we could say it starts in the school system. We go out with one another, right? Boys and girls. We gossip, we have conversation, we go back and forth about what people do in their lives, just because talking about people is always something like that's engaging, something that's a hot topic usually. I mean, you could talk about whatever you want. Me personally, I like when the discussion has some nuance or some substance. It just makes it like more fun for me personally. But most people like to just talk about themselves or talk about other people just because that's the go-to for most people. But the topics of people conversations happen to be around relationships, of course, is because, human connection is really, it's encompassing, it's engaging, it's fulfilling. It's something that everybody wants to be a part of just because connection is like one of the most basic human needs and traits that we operate on, right? So because of this, and because we talk about one another often, right? And we talk about how our lives are, and we let each other get in our lives like it's nothing, like, talk about what you did yesterday, what you ate, what car you drive, where you go to work and stuff, who you hang out with. This stuff should be more personal to who you trust, but we allowed it to just be the base for basic engagement and conversation, even with coworkers you don't know or people who you've only known for a short while, just because you want to bring some engagement to the table. You know that yourself, you become an asset to whatever place you go. So when you give out information about yourself, you're giving out your social value, basically, by describing yourself. You don't have to go full in detail, right? It's better to leave out some stuff, especially the intimate stuff, if you want to. But even some people don't care about that. They just say it like, oh, I fucked this one chick last night and it was cool type of, you know what I'm saying? Like, it don't matter, but sometimes you do want to keep stuff to yourself. But anyways, because social validation, when it comes to talking about people and connection, is based on basically or loosely relationships. It starts to give off the idea that this stuff is every day, right? Like, oh, there's relationships to be had every day. Like, you can just meet somebody and, it doesn't matter what you do, there will always be somebody else, right? And for the most part, this is true, but it's not always the case. When it comes to people who are naturally or conventionally attractive, you could say that because they just have more influence in general, or if they just happen to have things about them that make them attractive or influential. So if people decide they like to hang around them just because their social value is always high, they always have something to talk about, they're high vibrational, they're good energy to be around, then those people end up having a really good social value and end up having more influence to be able to attract more people and have more relationships in general. But because of this, and because these people exist, and because they're less morally bound and they don't really care about the results of their behavior in the long run, they end up discussing their lives to people through conversation, and then that information is relayed back, and in their minds they decide that it's normal to live how they live, just fleeing relationships, going and monkey branching left and right. And this kind of stuff is it wasn't too harmful in the past because we didn't decide that there's too much of an issue with it. I mean, as long as nobody gets harmed, as long as, feelings can be hurt, and you gotta be a grown up about that stuff, because ain't nobody finna hold your shoulder for you while you crying, or while you feel like you're in distress because of it. I mean, it shouldn't be happening if you ask me, but there's not much you can do about what people decide to do. But anyways, so because of that, and because people who bounce around relationships so often just happen to be the people who have high social value in general, then it gives off the subconscious idea that anybody can just go ahead and just bounce off relationships, or just have fleeting relationships that don't last, that just have some nuanced value that doesn't have longevity. So you could just be in a relationship for somebody simply for the sexual value, or for the intimate value, or for the monetary value, right? And this labels people, or it tells people subconsciously that it's okay to do this. So we do this so often, and then we have conversations about these topics over and over. And so this tells people, or this tells in the dude circles, that it's okay to just go ahead and just bounce from girl to girl if you want to, or if you want to decide that you're just in it for a quick fling, or you're just in it to gain some status with this person, or you're just in it so that you can build some sort of connection and use that connection to have to do something further in life, right? Maybe they have some connection to somebody at a job, so you want to use their influence to help you get that type shit, right? This subconscious stuff does enable that to other people to believe that it's okay to just keep bouncing back and forth. And this is where the bond between us start to dwindle as well. So we decide, because it's normal, and because, at some point there is value outside of just the relationship itself, we tell ourselves, okay, you could do this over and over. And as long as, you're gaining your value, you're not harming anybody too much. And at the end of the day, they still find their way around life. It doesn't matter. The problem, though, is that when we do this often, usually the other person has some sort of dead weight attributed to them as a result. They're scarring. There's something that's left with them, and then they have to deal with that. But you don't know, because you're not thinking about that. You told yourself that it's okay to do what you did, harming their feelings or doing whatever you did, because most people do it. And because we do it over and over, the repetition tells people that's not even a problem, right? So this tells people you could just cheat. This tells people you could just betray. You could just be in the relationship for money, and it doesn't matter. You could just be in it for the social status. You could just do what you want in the relationship, as long as you're getting your position in a job for it, as long as you're in a business with somebody because of it, right? And then, people become superficial this way. Their morals become more malleable. And then they tell themselves that this is how life is lived. Like, life isn't fair. You just got to do what you can to make it. Capitalism furthers this off. They tell you this is what you have to do anyway if you want to make it, because nobody else is going to help you. Nobody's going to hold your hand. You're just going to have to do it for yourself. And, you know, that's true. But personally, I think this shouldn't be the way, because, you know, it harms trust. It harms social connection. We don't want to be doing that, okay? Because the fabric of where we live depends on the peace that we maintain. And we can't maintain peace if we're always causing some sort of issue with somebody else because we need personal gain. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be somebody who wants to provide for yourself, but that provision doesn't need to come at the expense of somebody else, right? And so exploitation is subconsciously programmed that way. We tell ourselves that it's okay to do what we're doing because everybody does it. And that enables the base form of exploitation. So for men, that's basically what it is. It's just you want that status, or you want to get something out of it, or you want to try to gain a position somewhere because it helps you in life. And for women, it's a bit more dangerous, but it's a bit more systemic with them because they're not as strong as men. And they also don't have the same ability to work the same jobs, right? There are definitely more jobs allotted to men in general, because there's the idea that, or no, there's a great section of work that deals with manual labor. And of course, that's a man's world. I mean, sure, a woman can join that, but likely not going to be picked over a dude just because a dude is more likely to be stronger than a woman. That's just natural. As humans have progressed, naturally women have grown more into a submissive role just so that way they can bear the children. And men also like the fact that they nurture themselves a bit more and care for themselves more, so they'd rather have them in less hard working positions just so that way they can stay maintained and keep the family safe at home, type of deal, right? Whereas men, they do the hard labor because they're more able to do that. So for women, it's more of a survival thing when it comes to them cheating, or when it comes to them deciding to be exploitative for a relationship. Because if you know anything about female social groups, most women are extremely competitive, right? And especially amongst the ones that are really attractive, they tell themselves and they tell each other that there's nobody that's gonna help you. And you know what, this is true. There's nobody that helps these women at the end of the day. Yeah, men, they have the same issues, but you know, there's a baseline where it's like, we don't want to go too far because we know what men can do to each other, right? So we tell ourselves, don't do this, or at least keep the bro code, right? Because we don't want to go down into them existential issues where we're fighting each other, right? Because we can cause some serious harm physically. So we know not to do that. But women, they don't necessarily get into that stuff, and they don't care, right? And it's because they're seen as, well, now that we're trying to push this equality thing and feminism, whatnot, and giving off the subconscious idea that they got to make it for themselves too, because we wanted to see, you know, if we give them, if the society gives them jobs and the same opportunities as men, then, you know, they have to do the same things. But they don't, what we didn't realize, or what they didn't realize, is that this leaves them in seriously misfortunate positions if they're left alone, or if they don't have a social system that supports them, right? And so this subconsciously tells them, because they can't necessarily fight to have stability for themselves, not as easily as a man, then they have to be more manipulative, which means more exploitative. And that's actually where I think that comes from. I think that the idea that women are more naturally manipulative than men is because of survival, as a result of the low trust, right? Because of the cheating and because of the exploitation for survival, because of capitalism. I think that shit needs to go. Like, fuck capitalism. But anyways, they do it for survival. So them monkey branching, them causing chaos, them using people for status, or using them to gain positions at jobs, is because they also need to survive. I mean, of course, if you're individual and you're a woman, you got to do what you got to do. And right now in survival, especially in 2025, that means monkey branching. That means using a man for his resources. That means doing what you can to gain some sort of financial stability, and then working for yourself after that if you can. But it definitely it doesn't hold back from wanting to exploit a man if he lets, right? And that's where that manipulation comes from. They know, like, especially because we're so social media is so sexually driven, as well as modern society now. They know they could just use their market value against the man, and he's likely gonna say yeah, and you know, pay for this woman because she could do that with him. You know what I'm saying? Like, most of these dudes is going for that. Like, and I kind of hate that, but it is what it is. You know, I try to teach men myself, because you know, you don't want to be a victim too long. I mean, sure, you have your needs, your wants, but you don't want to be a victim, my dude, because they'll leave you. Like, they'll leave you with nothing. They'll leave you on the street butt fucking naked with nothing. Like, don't doubt it. Don't doubt it. Like, just don't believe that it's not gonna be you. Okay? Don't believe that the woman you with is not gonna do that to you, or it wouldn't do that to you. If it comes down to survival, they'll do it. If it comes down to survival, they will do it. Any human. Okay? We all have the will to survive, and if we're not having our base needs met in this system, you're gonna see some pretty crazy stuff happen. That's capitalism. But yeah, they cheat. They cheat, they coerce, they manipulate, they triangulate, they monkey wrench. Because there's money to be gained if they can do it well, or if they're smart, or there's some status to use to have that, or there's some assets to get, or there's something, right? And it gives us, because we talk about this in conversation like it's casual, and because it ends up being the topic of conversation for the most part, this tells us that subconscious programming is okay. That is fine as long as nobody gets hurt. But you know, somebody does get hurt, especially in the modern day with that type of stuff. But we don't think about it. So, you know, just be careful with that. This stuff spirals because of survival. But the survival is forced on you because of capitalism. We live in an abundant world where resources are plentiful and recyclable, but the system decides to give you the idea of scarcity, so that way you feel like you have to go against others subconsciously in order to have survival for yourself, in order for your survival to be met. And that's the problem. I just wanted to get on that because I know we probably know this stuff, but you know, if I speak to how it relates to the system in connection to different aspects, that probably gives you a clearer idea of how it gets programmed subconsciously and how you can deprogram it. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to get on. I like connecting just because, you know, deprogramming is a thing that we're trying to do nowadays, just because it's harder to maintain autonomy nowadays. Because, you know, there are many things tied to your survival that are not directly at your disposal or under your control. So, you know, things like money and relationships matter, especially when it comes to connection or needing status, so that way you can have some sort of control over your own life. So you want to be able to fend for yourself mentally at first, right? For the most part, because if you can't fend for yourself mentally, then, you know, you're likely going to be under someone else's control and you not know it. So, you know, try to be somebody who wants to learn. I tell people this all the time because it's important. As long as you're learning all the time, as long as you're trying to figure things out, and as long as you want to remain autonomous despite circumstances, and you have the will to try and keep going, I promise that eventually you'll have more control over your life and things will get easier. But you gotta want to do it. There are a lot of people who just call it a day, and then they remain a crab in the bucket like everybody else because they're not controlled, or they don't control their own lives. They just let the circumstances control them. You know what I'm saying? And we can't be like that. I mean, it works if you want to be in the corporate ladder, but you're never going to be able to climb the corporate ladder, and then the corporate ladder can kill you, honestly, if you're not careful, because you're giving them full disposal over your life. If you're not a full-blown ass-kissing, boot-licking corporate employee, you will not last. So, you know, not having your control over your life and going through that process is That's not even a safe route. Not anymore, at least. I mean, there used to be jobs available all the time, right? That you could just go on Indeed and find something, but not anymore, really, right? It's hard to get jobs. I mean, people are applying thousands of jobs a month, not getting shit. Doesn't matter how you look or your skills. You can have all the degrees, all the certificates and all that, and the sponsorships, and it doesn't matter. If they don't want you, they don't want you. It's that simple. And they want somebody that's more manipulable anyway. So if you're more controllable, they look at you as more of a highlight. But again, with them having more control over your life, it's harder for you to be autonomous, and it's harder for you to control the circumstances, and that can lead you in a disproportionate position. So just be careful with that. That's why I say just learn. Even if you are in a position to where you're letting circumstances control you just because there are things limiting you, still try to learn, because you never know. You never know. Like, it can be you, man. I'm telling you, this homeless stuff is systemic. It's systemic. It happens. It happens to anybody. If you're not extremely wealthy, if you don't have wealthy connections, if you weren't born into wealth, you can become homeless. Even if you had wealth, you can become homeless if you're not careful. Because of the connections and because of the systems, those in power, the elites need, or the want to control people, is really oppressive. And you will never see this at first. You will never. They make sure you don't know until it physically happens to you. So just be careful with that. That's pretty much it, man. Just, try to learn. Anyways, I'll see y'all on the next one. Hope y'all doing good. Have a good night, and peace out.